Welcome to Feed My Sheep Radio. I'm your host, Chuck Clement, with Dr. Jim Davis, the voice of Feed My Sheep. Tonight, Dr. Jim will talk to us about brotherly kindness. And I know everyone had the tip of their tongue, brotherly love, but Dr. Jim expressly said brotherly kindness. And we know when he has nuances around words, you better listen. So, Dr. Jim.
Oh, thank you very much. Your voice does sound stronger.
For a brief moment.
Well, I'm glad you're getting over it. Regarding our neighborly kindness is another, bumping the brotherly out for a minute. I'll explain that to you too. In today's world, I'm going to start with several scriptures. While scriptures are the foundation, and you've seen my foundation sheets before, scriptures, I'm going to start with some that are biblical. From all of them are from the New American Standard Bible. That's the most exact according to scholars. And while I'm not that kind of scholar, I take their word for it. Luke 6, verse 35. Quote, "But love your enemies and do good and lend, expecting nothing in return, and your reward will be great, and you will be sons of the Most High, for he himself is kind to ungrateful and evil men." That's Jesus speaking. Then we go to 1 Corinthians chapter 13, verse 4. Quote, "Love is patient, love is kind, and is not jealous. Love does not brag and is not arrogant." Unquote. Ephesians 4, 31 through 32 offers, quote, "Let all bitterness and wrath and anger and clamor and slander be put away from you, along with all malice. Be kind to one another, tender-hearted, forgiving each other, just as God in Christ also has forgiven you." Unquote. Acts 9:36, I would lift up for us. Quote, "Now in Joppa there was a disciple named Tabitha, which translated in Greek is called Dorcas. This woman was abounding with deeds of kindness and charity, which she continually did." Romans 11:22 offers the next quote, "Behold then the kindness and severity of God to those who fell, severity, but to you God's kindness. If you continue in his kindness, otherwise you also will be cut off." Unquote. Given our current culture circumstances, what's been called brotherly kindness, we might now consider as neighborly kindness. What excuse would you need to depart from God's claim upon your heart and actions to love your neighbor as you love yourself? Looting, carjacking, murder, theft, smash and grab, racism are all indications of a lack of kindness. Such acts are counter to God's way, and yet obviously accepted as appropriate behavior by many in our culture today. Such unkind behaviors can have many roots that are not God-centered. Let us consider some of the reasons that people use to make sure they do not care about their neighbor as much as themselves. An attitude of having been born at a disadvantage can cause a person to strike out against those who are not like them or not in agreement with their behavior. How might a mind determine when and where it is okay to loot or steal from the other person? What parts might birthright and geographic place of birth wage in causing a person to enter illegally in another's nation state, or to do as much harm as possible to those born with privilege or place? What attitude says it is okay to not stand in line, but to cheat to the head of the line? What would it say about the person accepting pay or some benefit for the recently arrived to have a place in line ahead of those standing in line? What does this say about the lack of kindness toward the neighbor trespassed against who is standing in line? What does this say about the abuse of the citizen neighbor who's paying for such illegal behaviors? What does this say about what kind of citizen the newly arrived illegal person who comes in abusing the rights of others will have in their kindness toward neighbors in the future? What kind of self-demeaning or neighbor-demeaning attitude would cause a person to break their fellow citizen covenant to enable and assist a rule-breaking non-citizen to trespass against the legal citizen? Some behaviors have reminded me of flagellation, where the person whips themselves. This flagellation is a personal body torment where their back becomes a bloody pulp with sins they've committed and not been punished for. Does such a person know the gift of Christ? How would punishing yourself for something your great grandparent did, what kind of sense does that make to your attitude of kindness of yourself? What difference does it make to think of your neighbor as legal or illegal? Being a co-conspirator with the illegal person against the citizen is not expressing neighbor kindness to the citizen. A prioritizing of the newly arrived possible citizen over the rights of the citizen is certainly not in the teachings of Jesus. First to the Jew, then to the Samaritans, and then to the Gentiles. It is a clear progression statement to his disciples then and now. First to the next door citizen neighbor, then to the national citizen neighbor, then to the citizens of the world. My Roman Catholic priest friends see the illegal immigrant as an obvious source of numeric strength and energy for their church denomination. My political Democrat friends see the illegal immigrant as a new voter for their side. And neither my priest friends or political friends want to deal with the trespass against other citizen neighbors that their encouraging and supporting illegal immigrants poses for neighborly unkindness. Drugs, slave labor by the cartels in payment for passage, and crime seem to be set aside for the greater good of their political party or church denomination. What kind of demeaning attitude toward our children and tomorrow's citizens would cause us to not pay our bills and cause the burden of our expenditures to be placed upon them? What has that to do with our tomorrow's neighborly unkindness? What would be your attitude toward the police or judicial system if you have felt they have failed your equal justice opportunity? Could such injustice spur you to riot and destroy businesses along Main Street? When might beheadings be appropriate to certain attitude models since crosses, nativity scenes are obscene, disturbing to people emotionally, and to be removed. How have kindness and truth dealt with those acts of persecution? Let's pause and ask, what does God, our Creator, have to say about all this? Don't give up. I am with you. Or value your neighbor because there is neither Jew or Gentile. Jesus asked, who are my brothers and my sisters in Mark? God's loving kindness endures forever, First Chronicles shares. God is color. God's love knows no geographic borders. God knows no borders among Homo sapiens. God's presence is up close and personal to every human being around the world, as well as created creatures in other worlds. But back to justice and kindness. Murder is killing, but there are always extenuating circumstances, and then some attorneys know the law better than others, and there are occasions when all 12 people can get it wrong, so there's always room in any human system for improvement. Legal justice, kindness, is one thing, but some things in life are just, well, unjust. Not all of the young women in the various church families I served or the communities I served were as attractive as my daughters. It just wasn't so. And no matter how much makeup or amazing clothing design others used, they could not make up the difference in simply raw beauty. Not all athletes have equal capabilities. Have you heard of a transgender girl losing to a natural girl in swimming, for example? Justice, in terms of many things, is an illusion, and differences in intelligence, beauty, athleticism, size, hair color, and many other facets are fixed, while most can be tampered with. And certainly not just because pageants and awards are given for such things. Does your attitude of kindness about yourself affect your relationship with God and neighbor? How does your relationship to neighbor change without God in the equation? I illustrate with mobs and looting. How does your attitude of kindness change with education? Formal class education has been an experience that has fast-forwarded some people to a better life. Experience has been a consistent portal for a better life through internship and practice teaching, but there are other fields that offer growth through experience, such as carpentry, plumbing, and electricians, without the required additional class education instruction. So really, education happens by experience alone, or class with teacher education alone, or education and experience together are all options for growth and development. Experience alone is the longest standing tradition and still offers a solid foundation. Take, for example, the raising of a child. How dependent is the child on the family life they're comforted in as compared to hours in the classroom for the grade-giving teacher or instructor? Just as an illustration, and certainly not to brag, I thought of my own and my family's education patterns. My personal grade school, high school, college, seminary, doctoral encompassed a conservative number of 79 personal encounters with teachers and professors over a very extended period of time and input from them. Of those 79, 6 stand out to me. 1 in the first grade, 1 in the 7th grade, 1 in college, 1 in seminary, 2 in the doctoral program. Further, I find that those are the ones I can name. How about you? What teachers can you name or refer to as having an impact on your life, and why? What family member or church member or neighbor or peer had a significant impact upon your attitudes about life? What neighbors have fed you with kindness? What teachers have fed you with kindness? What pastors have fed you with kindness? Who do you think would remember your kindness toward them? 1 Peter 2, verses 1 through 3 offers, therefore, putting aside all malice and all deceit and hypocrisy and envy and all slander, like newborn babes, long for the pure milk of the word, so that by it you may grow in respect to salvation, if you have tasted the kindness of the Lord. Now back to Jesus talk. What does God do with those who are unkind to their lawful neighbors, actual brothers, sisters, and mothers? Mark 3, verses 32 through 35. Quote, a crowd was sitting around him, and they said to him, behold, your mother and your brothers are outside looking for you. Answering them, he said, who are my mother and my brothers? And looking about at those who were sitting around him, he said, behold, my mother and my brothers, for whoever does the will of God, he is my brother and sister and mother. There you have it from Jesus himself. Those who keep the law of treating their neighbor with kindness are doing the will of God. Otherwise, they are out of step with the will of God and treading in dangerous times, in dangerous living that will have eternal significance and direction.
My first comment is, ouch. My father, who was a minister, would say his goal was to step on toes before the pot roast got finished cooking back at the house. Because if he went overtime, his toes would get stepped on by all the women in the church who he ruined their Sunday dinner. So to be a little humorous here, but ouch. You unveiled all of us in this kindness thing. That's pretty rough stuff. I'm sitting here thinking this morning about this pity party I was having with myself about someone did something and I took offense to it, and it's basically trivial dribble as it relates to what you just told me I should be, the benchmark should be. And I'm sitting here saying, oh my gosh, that's me. That was early on in your message, not later on. I got stepped on early on here. Just the expectation of, I shouldn't have had the expectation of any feedback. It was for me to give the kindness, not to have any expectation coming back my way. We started this podcast, ladies and gentlemen, with me not being able to talk. Dr. Jim's now probably thinking, I wish he was back into that mode again.
No, not at all.
How do we can make something, here I go. We can make something like kindness so difficult.
Yes, and you mentioned about love. You see, kindness is a preliminary toward love. And the idea is that you can step on somebody over there and take advantage of them, or you can help somebody and put down somebody else with the same act. Have to bear in mind that kindness preempts love. And in order to get to love, you better be kind to them before you get there. It's just incredible to me how I was trying to put it in the scripture about a baby, about tasting the kindness of God and understanding the kindness of Jesus. Jesus demonstrated that in so many ways. But the you can't say you love somebody without being kind to them.
You started out by talking about there are three levels of kindness.
Yes.
And I'd never really heard kindness structured like that.
Uh-huh.
Certainly you draw that out from a biblical.
Yes, it's all biblical
anchor.
based. Right.
So go through those again. So it's the furthest away neighbor, then the next closest neighbor, and then the neighbor. Is that the way?
It's Jesus talk, first to the Jew, then to the Samaritan, and then to the Gentile. And it had to do with your first responsibility is to your neighbors just at elbow's length, the farm next to you. Those are your immediate neighbors. And then your small town community, your basketball teams and all this. These are neighbors. You take I played on several teams, and now you have. You can take people who've got really different personalities and they come from different places in life, and you put them on a team and they're there for the same purpose, and they're encouraging each other, and they develop fellowships that last a long time. Well, those are neighbors. But then you've got to think about the wider neighbor group as the state and the nation. And then that is, you pull that group in neighbors in terms of military service and some other kinds of things that are binding. And then it's to the neighbor outside. And we've got people who want to love the person over in Somalia much more than they love their neighbor or somebody in their community, or certainly love the people like where they would like to send the people New Jersey or Florida or whatnot that are here illegally. It's just really so obvious, but it's it's Jesus teaching, first to the Jew, then to the Samaritan, which is mixed blooded, and then to the Gentile that didn't have any Jewish blood in it. And so it is, in terms of proximity, think of the ever widening circle, centric circle.
So so kindness is a precursor to love.
Yes, it is.
What's the essence of kindness? I mean, what makes it so important that it be the first step to love?
The essence of kindness is that the other person is just as valuable as you are, that God has made both of you equal. And the essence of that is that you can, I can forgive anybody for anything, but the question is, will God? So the idea is that if you look at who your neighbor is, your neighbor looks at you as though you are neighbor. And so you just simply treat them as though they are equally with you. It has nothing to do with intelligence, has nothing to do with education, has nothing to do with color or age or sexism or anything. It has nothing to do with that. It is clearly Homo sapien neighbor. And where we are closest to those neighbors, that's where we have to grow. That's where we have to bloom.
Well, the world's upside down relative to that definition.
Definitely.
I mean, if you listen to the news and you do your kindness scorecard, I mean, it's pretty ugly scorecard.
Right.
So how do you, it's always a matter of, if you see behavior that's out of sync with what your thought process is, and it's so ingrained in culture and people, it keeps building and manifesting itself and getting bigger and bigger.
Right.
How do you break that? How do you say, look, guys, stop?
Yeah. The way you break that is you offer yourself as light to the darkness. It's more about keeping your relationship with God. The idea is that they'll try and hoof out your light, and the what you need to do is be light, be kind, be loving, be and don't let some of the perimeters of that others would draw you or box you in. Let your love, your light shine where you are, and the light that shines the brightest at home shines the furthest away. Do you agree with that?
Mhm.
Okay. And take the sun is the same way. And so the idea is that you just must hold steady with your light, and other people will see and experience your light. And in that they do, they will take upon themselves some of the light purposes. Let's face it, we can really paint an ornery picture about our culture right now. Um, and you can always paint sort of an ugly picture about a church fellowship where 20 people are responsible for 80% of the stuff that happens. 20% does 80% of the work.
Yeah.
But the point of it is that that group makes a difference. And those that are hangers on eventually grab hold of the faith, and they become strong in it. And it is just the way that God has made us. The church grew earliest and longest, perhaps, in the home. And that's the Jewish tradition before they had synagogues and all. But it's really multifaceted. I don't want to answer questions you aren't asking, but do you have anything else to follow up on that?
It's like, a lot of this always comes back to the old adage, man in the mirror.
Oh, yes,
I'm asking how to change the world, and what you're saying is go look in the mirror, because if
that's
you can't
right.
change yourself,
That is
don't worry about the
exactly.
strategic change. Yeah.
Think about the serenity prayer. You just can't change some things. And so those things that you can change is about you. Yep.
Final comment on kindness, Dr. Jim.
God is kind, and he calls us to be kind. And we can be kind to people. It's easier to be kind than to love them. We can offer a kind gesture to the pharmacist and to the lady as we open the door. It doesn't mean that we have to go in depth and love for them. So kindness is a stepping stone into and reflects a love relationship that you would have in your heart for God. Just as before we talked about praising God, it's so important that you see every step in life to be something that you authenticate in being kind in the name of the Lord. It's not you that's it, because that gets into humanism. It is your kindness is a gesture of love for God. So neighbor to neighbor is equal because of God, and we love neighbors out of a love for our God. And what you do, you see the real, I'm getting into a different facet here, I'm afraid, but what's your real purpose? The real customer to you is God. That's who you want to please. That is your customer. And that is also the one who will be rendering judgment on you. I think of the little lady who was in Yugoslavia that was being asked, why was she sweeping so carefully around the steps of the building there that was the city hall? And they asked her, why are you doing that? He says, because I'm working for the Lord and he wants me to do this right. You can take any act, any gesture, and be offering it to the Lord. And that's the key. That's what a denomination is for. A denomination is a group of people dedicated to serving God as their first customer.
Dr. Jim, thank you. And I can't imagine anyone who's listened to this not having to step back and reflect on their last act of kindness and anticipate their next act of kindness.
Good.
Thank you, Dr. Jim.
Thank you.